with that, we have Ryan Eisner here in the studio. We're going to transition to some college basketball. For those of you who don't know Ryan, Ryan is, I think the way I actually describe you is the one person that isn't an athlete here that objectively knows more about college basketball than I do. And it's not even close. This kid's been watching college basketball since what? Since you were probably 4 or 5?
Yeah, 4 or 5.
And he does bracketology. He posted on his Instagram. He's a big college basketball fan. And we are just here to ask you about your bracket. Obviously, it's February. We got Duke Carolina around the corner. We got a bunch of games that could have implications. And we just want to ask you about it. So, Ryan, I think the first thing we want to start with here as our Davidson Bracketologist is looking at the bubble. I don't know if you when you do your brackets, you have like a last 4 in, first 4 out kind of breakdown. But if you do, let us know what you're thinking along those lines. And then what about notable teams you think that are trending up or down around the bubble area?
Yeah, so I do. My last 4 in right now is Indiana, Richmond, Seton Hall, and Stanford. Of those 4, I think Indiana's trending down. At a record that's 1 game above 500 overall, they need to be very careful because that win at Iowa, which is a great win, will only take them so far. If they're, say, 15-13 going into Selection Sunday, it will be a very nervous one. I think they'll get in. I think they'd get in just purely because the Big Ten is so good. But at some point, the wins need to happen. Now, for my first 4 out, I've got North Carolina, St. Louis, Maryland, and Georgia Tech. Maryland's a really tricky case. They're actually in a very important game as we speak in Happy Valley against Penn State. Penn State's a team that their record isn't good, but if they can start to pick up wins, they have a win over Wisconsin and a 20-point win at Virginia Tech. They could be an intriguing team if they can find some wins. Maryland has a not so good record, but they've won at Wisconsin and at Illinois, among others. So again, another tricky team there. The biggest thing this week with the first 4 out is the Atlantic 10's in trouble.
Oh, big time. I mean, we've been seeing teams fall left and right. Obviously, SLU dropped a couple big games, if I'm not mistaken. Bonaventure's looking pretty good, but other than that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I haven't seen any really, and Richmond's like on the bubble, but other than that, I haven't really seen people were hyping up potential 4-bid league. I just don't see any path to anything above 2 at best.
No, I mean, no, that's not going to happen. Although I think VCU is a team that's right in that bubble conversation. I think the VCU Richmond games, if one of those teams beats the other twice, the winner is in, the loser's probably got no shot. Bonaventure and St. Louis actually play tomorrow afternoon. That's a game that I would highly suggest St. Louis find a way to win because they'd be really behind the 8 ball if they lost. Bonaventure's probably in good enough position where they can lose and still be in, but they can't lose to St. Louis and then lose to LaSalle next week. And LaSalle's been basically eating up the rest of the league. A-10 bubble teams have had a hard time with LaSalle of late.
Absolutely. And Ryan, the one big thing that stuck out to me here is, so you have North Carolina out right now. Obviously, I'm looking at Lenardi's today. I see they're actually last 4 buys. And to be fair, with this season, this is a huge fluctuation along the bubble just because of all the COVID cancellations and teams trending up and down rapidly and all this. So, obviously that this is a more subjective year than most, especially right around February. So what is your reasoning with North Carolina being there? And what about Richmond being, I think you have them last 4 in, I think they're out in Lenardi. So where's your thinking? And obviously Lenardi is not the gospel. Everyone has their different opinions and everyone really has great cases for their differences. So I just want to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah. The main thing is that Richmond has 2 very bad losses to LaSalle and Hofstra. North Carolina has a bunch of not good really wins. Now, North Carolina, as bad as Duke is, Duke would be a quad 1 victory on the road for North Carolina, which would be huge. And now if they lose that game, they go even further out. What I think is helping Richmond, and we're going to talk about Cinderellas, I think, later, so we'll get to this, but Richmond's win over Loyola Chicago is better than any win North Carolina has. And that North Carolina also has a loss to Georgia Tech, which Georgia Tech's a solid team. They're also right in that mix, but some of North Carolina's results in general have kind of stuck out a little bit. Now, but I think North Carolina, to me, they'll sneak back in if they win on Saturday.
Yeah, and that actually provides a good segue here to this next question I have. Obviously, we Duke Carolina. It's a weirder game than normal. Obviously, you have the pandemic, you have no fans, but also both of these teams are not the juggernauts we expect them to be. And obviously, North Carolina, we got a taste of them not being that good last year, but Duke has been so consistent. I mean, I think 24 straight NCAA tournament appearances. That's in real jeopardy. I want to know what you have to say about Duke specifically in this game, because obviously right now they are not trending in the right direction. They're not on the bubble, and it seems like this is almost as an elimination game for them.
Yeah, so my thing with Duke for this game is a win, and they're still not even really that close to being in. A loss, if Duke loses here, their overall and conference records are 500, and that means that their chances of making the NIT are in jeopardy, let alone the NCAA tournament, because the NIT rarely takes teams that have a record below 500, although this year could be different, but still. Like, this is a must-win game, and beyond that, Duke has games against Louisville coming up. They've got a game against Virginia. Honestly, I think Duke has to beat Virginia. I think the Virginia game, and if they reschedule the Florida State game, they must win one of those two, because even if they beat Carolina, that's still not a great win with how not good Carolina is, and especially with how bad Carolina looked against Clemson the other day.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, for those of you who don't know, Carolina lost 54-50 at Clemson. And yes, Clemson's defense is good, but Clemson in general hasn't been playing well of late. And that was a pretty tough loss for a Carolina team that is playing for its tournament life. And there's one more question that came from one of my suitemates just now. He just messaged me about it. He wants to know, Ryan, if you're looking now, VCU or Richmond going forward, who do you give the edge to making the tournament to? So maybe not just related to your recent bracketology, but knowing what both of these teams have going forward down the stretch, which of these teams, if you're a betting man, are you saying this team will make the tournament and this team won't?
I do have Richmond in right now. VCU I have currently in my next four out, but going forward, I trust VCU more than I trust Richmond. I have Richmond in because that win over Loyola Chicago is really good, and it's been getting better and better and better. And Loyola Chicago, if you looked at Lenardi's today, he has them comfortably in as a 9, which provides Richmond with a good win. But VCU's win over Utah State has also started to look much better as the season has gone on. And VCU's win over Memphis is now starting to look a little bit intriguing too. I also just think VCU is better. From a basketball perspective, I think VCU will beat Richmond twice.
Havoc, man. I respect it. I mean, I can see it too.
Yeah, Mike Rhodes has done a really good job there. They had an unfortunate second half against St. Bonaventure, but VCU, to me, and Richmond, while they're in right now, but at some point they're going to have to do something other than just point to that win over Loyola Chicago. That's a great win, but at some point, they're going to have to do something else. Otherwise, the losses to LaSalle and Hofstra, which are both really bad, are going to keep them out.
That's fair. And Ryan, moving forward now, any other key bubble games this weekend you're looking at? Obviously, Duke Carolina is kind of related to that, but like, is there a game or two that you're looking at and you're like, this is crucial going forward for the bubble?
Well, it's actually a lot of mid-major bubble focus this week for me. St. Bonaventure, St. Louis is a huge game. And then you're talking about the Mountain West Conference at the top. Boise State, Colorado State, and Utah State are playing. Colorado State almost lost, but they were able to win yesterday and avoid what would have been a bad loss to Wyoming. Boise State is a really good team, in my opinion. They have a sneaky tough series with Nevada that I think that could be interesting. And then in the Missouri Valley Conference, Loyola Chicago and Drake need to be very careful not to look past this weekend, because to next weekend when they play each other in what's going to be a very big series.
Fair, fair. And Ryan, the last kind of segments we're going into here, I want you to break down your 1 and 2 seeds and who has the fourth number one. Because obviously Villanova loses this week, Houston loses this week, and we were talking about it today. You said you think that might rule them out of a one, at least for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I think that's going to make that, because East Carolina is so bad. I really think that could make it hard for Houston to even get a 2. I do not even have them on the 2 line at the moment.
Okay.
I have Texas, Illinois, Villanova, and Ohio State is the best 2, which means I have Alabama as my fourth number 1 seed, which means we could have a college football playoff championship rematch in basketball in the Elite Eight. I think it's very close. It is really close, and Alabama as a 1 seed is another thing for a team that's on the bubble. Western Kentucky won at Alabama. I have Western Kentucky in as one of my last 4 buys right now because that Alabama win is very good. And Western Kentucky's other ones are very good. That's another bubble team to watch, although their games this weekend just got canceled, but it's another team to keep an eye on. Ohio State, the difference to me between Ohio State and Alabama is basically non-existent, but one of them has to be the 1 and one of them has to be the 2, and I really think that'll flip-flop.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask you about. I was listening to a CBS Sports college basketball podcast today, and despite the fact that Alabama is also the fourth one in Lenardi's bracket, they were leaning Ohio State, especially after what happened last night. Obviously, for those of you who don't know, they go in a Carver Hawkeye ran. They beat Iowa, and granted, that was one of the most fun games to watch I've seen.
Oh, yes, that was very fun.
And to be fair, Iowa has zero defense, and it's not like Ohio State was clamps, but they put it on when they needed to power surge ahead in the last.
They made some big time shots, and Iowa to me screams 3 seed that gets upset by a 14.
And honestly, I don't disagree with you. I've been seeing a lot. I think I forget who Lenardi had him matched up with this week, but it was low key a kind of sketchy game. I could see that as well. I think Iowa, if they run into a hot shooting team that can keep pace, it's going to be a huge issue. All right, Ryan. And then the last question we have for you here as our new resident bracketologist, I want to ask you, what are your potential Cinderellas? If you're looking at teams right now, what is 1 or 2 teams you're saying, mid-major squads, you're saying, you know what, I could see this team making a huge run?
Well, I think we all know about Loyola Chicago and Drake and the Mountain West teams. I think they're all capable, but I like Belmont a lot. I think Belmont is a team that could be very dangerous. And another team that I think could be dangerous in this field if they continue winning the Conference USA is UAB under Andy Kennedy. I like the way UAB is playing. They're kind of going back to some of the old kind of disruptive style that they used to play. So I think UAB could be a tough out if they make it.
That's a good point. And also, to your point about that, I know Belmont's like 17 or 18-1. They just won a game on the road last night by like 30 points.
Yeah, and the thing is that regardless of who you're playing, these mid-major teams that just rack up wins that are so used to winning are usually the really tough outs because they just make winning plays. They're just in the habit of winning. And speaking of winning plays, I'm a little concerned about Gonzaga. They're getting in bad habits, in my opinion. You can play a F game for like 20 minutes and win by 20 in the West Coast Conference. You can't do that against even the 8-9 winner.
Yeah, and against Pacific last night, they were losing at halftime. They surged ahead in the second half, taking control of it. And that was the closest it's been. I mean, they've had other games. I remember last weekend they had a game I was watching against, I think, Pepperdine.
Yeah.
They went down double digits in the first half, and they managed to surge it, get it close at halftime. I think they took control by the start of the second half. But like you're right on that. I mean, I've seen Gonzaga play a lot. I think it's interesting because they have enough experience on that team, but you'll see guys get in foul trouble. Jalen Suggs has had problems in foul trouble, not last night, but in the past, and even Andrew Nemhard off the bench when Suggs gets in foul trouble has had problems. I've seen Timmy getting some issues as well. Yeah, no, you're right. I think if they run into a game where they're missing shots and they have 1 or 2 key pieces that have to sit on the bench with fouls, I think you're absolutely right. They could get beat by an 8 or a 9 or in the Sweet 16 by a big Power 5 team. All right. Ryan, we'd like to thank you, man, for coming on the Gold Mine. For those of you who want to check Ryan out, I believe he is on Twitter. You want to plug your Twitter and your Instagram for us?
Yeah, all right. I'll tell you, my Twitter is at Eisner, EISNER _ Ryan. My Instagram is just Ryan.Eisner.
Perfect. Perfect. Well,
Great.
Ryan, thank you for coming. I'm sure we will see you in the lead up to March Madness and potentially on Selection Sunday. I'm sure we'll be in touch, Brent, man.
Thank you. Glad to join from my bracket bunker.
Hey, y'all. Thank you, everyone, for watching. If you want to see our last video, click here. If you want to see our next video, click here. And if you want to subscribe, click on my face.